Mercedes Mone is making money moves and is the new IWGP Women's Champion and is set to take it across the world, in her words. We're going to talk about that and more. This is WrstlXtra. Yo, this is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate. And of course, well, not always joined by my two partners, but this time just the one. It is the professor that is Gerard Bonner. My guy, how are you doing? How has your week been so far?
Man, it's been a really, really good week. The world of wrestling has been nuts. And so amazing, historic times. And I'm glad that we get to talk about it.
Yes, let's get straight into it. History has been made, as I said as well. Mercedes Mone, formerly known as Sasha Banks, is now the IWGP Women's Champion, only the second ever. And a nice fun fact is she is also now the first Black female to hold a championship in WWE and New Japan Pro Wrestling. We've seen a few of her interviews, whether it be beforehand, some of the stuff afterwards, and her whole thing has been this dream of working towards wrestling in Japan. We've talked about it a couple of times. The famous interview that she had with Stone Cold on the Smoking Skull podcast, where she was talking about, even before she got to WWE, she thought she would never make it to WWE. Her whole thing was about Japan and Mexico and wrestling there. In a post-interview after winning the championship, she said that she'd been working towards this moment since she was 10 years old. We've watched the match, we've seen the craziness. How did you find the whole spectacle, the match itself, and the reactions since she's won?
Well, I will say this. I feel like she brings a largeness to New Japan Pro Wrestling, certainly on the women's side, that wasn't there before. Obviously, she helped sell that thing out literally within 4 minutes of the announcement of this match back on January the 4th, but then to see the building packed, people in anticipation of this. They made this part of the double main event because they understood the vibe. So that's huge compared to that same title being number 2 on the Wrestle Kingdom card. Think about that. On Wrestle Kingdom, this was the second match on the card, the women's title, and it was 5 minutes. They went over 25 minutes in this co-main event. So that tells you plenty. And then the entrance that she had dancers. I mean, it was a very WWE-like, WrestleMania-like entrance for her. Now this is interesting. I am a fan of New Japan for sure, but there was so it's weird. So on one hand, if you were one of those who watched Elimination Chamber Saturday night and then flipped over to watch Battle in the Valley, there was an immediate difference you saw. Like, I could not get past like, whoa, this looks massively different. And maybe it was because it was in the States, because I know if this were Tokyo Dome, it'd be a different conversation, right? But with that said, I think she really raised the stakes of New Japan Pro Wrestling, raised our interest level in there, which is what she was supposed to do. She absolutely understood the assignment. She was in great form in that ring, had an amazing match for everybody who was worried back on January the 4th what this would look like. Oh, she shut all those folks up. It was amazing. And then her desire to take this around the world. We're really in historic times right now. And I think everything she intended to do, she did, and then some. I think we're going to be writing about this period of time for Mercedes Mone, because she absolutely changed really what the goal can be for women's wrestlers. The pinnacle at one point for many was the WWE.
Cool.
But to hear her say the pinnacle is New Japan, that changes a lot.
And here's the thing, it opens up doors that were never there before. So she's talking about taking it across the world. Now, obviously in the WWE, they go across the world all the time. They travel here, there, and everywhere. India, Saudi Arabia, the UK, they go all over the place. But it's not the same. What she's saying is a very different thing, because we know, and she's mentioned, I think we mentioned it, I've heard it somewhere, where obviously New Japan are connected to so many different promotions around the world. So it's not just New Japan, the promotion, going to different places, because they don't necessarily do that themselves. It's going to be Mercedes going to different promotions around the world. And that is the part that is just kind of almost unfathomable, because, again, we know these connections that people have, but we've not seen a Carter here, there, and everywhere. We've not seen Tanahashi here, there, and everywhere. We've seen some of the, I'll say this kind of, blanket level, like lower level New Japan stars in Impact, turn up in AAA and and AEW and stuff like that. But to have Mercedes Mone, arguably the biggest female star in the world, especially right now, the most talked about, and obviously, her credentials speak for herself, for her to then end up in Impact. She's already mentioned Mickey James. AEW, AAA, wherever else it is I can't fathom just how massive that could possibly be. And when you're saying, we're going to be writing about this, it's gonna be because of that. So it's just gonna be, it's about to be very crazy with this, because New Japan are on this whole thing as well, where they want to appeal to the global market now. They're trying to kind of push the boundaries just a little bit more. It not being just about what they're doing in Japan, but also trying to, conquer the world, I guess, in many ways. And it possibly could have happened with some of their biggest stars. Again, I mentioned Okada, Tanahashi, those guys. But for it to be her, who already has a worldwide following, it's almost like Japan's the only place people probably didn't know who she was. Whereas everyone else,
to an extent, right.
You know what I mean? So they've already, they're already kind of 8% of the way there. You know what I mean? With her holding this championship. And again, you mentioned the difference with the match at Wrestle Kingdom to this one as well. That 5 minutes to now 25 minutes, then being the the one before the last match on the card, a double main event. They weren't brave enough to put it as the last one. I agree. But it's still a massive statement. All the same. In your mind, what do you think is like one of the biggest things she could possibly do with this championship? As in, where could she appear? Who could she face? What's the possibilities here?
Well, already she's talked about, and there's been talk about her battling AZM over in Stardom, which is cool, which is dope. But I mean, I think to your point, we have a chance to see her do some things that have never been done. And so for me, I think the first big opportunity comes March the 30th at this multiverse that's happening, a joint production between Impact and New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's happening WrestleMania week, and we could legitimately see Mickey James versus Mercedes Mone. It can happen WrestleMania week. It's that early. I think it's that early. And you raise a very interesting point. In this era where so many people are calling themselves world champions, you really have to go back to, the run that Ric Flair had in the 80s, where he was legitimately traveling around the world, and it wasn't so much the NWA, because to your point, when WWE travels, it's WWE folks against WWE folks in other locations. Like when the NFL leaves the States and comes over to London, it's not them playing a team from London. They're just bringing everybody over. We're on tour. That's what that is, right? It's a different situation when you're going into someone else's country and facing the best that they have.
Right.
That's what Mercedes is talking about. Kind of like what Jonathan Gresham did actually a couple of years ago with the Ring of Honor Championship, how he was traveling to different promotions in different countries, you know, to defend that title. But we've never seen a woman do it. True. We've never seen a woman do it. True. So that's what makes this all so different, let alone a woman who is as world-renowned as Mercedes Mone. When I think about historic moments, this is really akin to 1992 after Flair wins the Rumble and he holds the WWE title up and says with a tear in my eye, it's the greatest moment of my life. This was an NWA guy. We would never see that. So to see her, who many considered a WWE lifer, say that I've worked since the age of 10 for this moment, massive on a global scale. And, you know, I know we primarily talk about Black wrestlers here. This transcends that.
Right.
This allows not just Black little girls to see I can wrestle around the world, but any girl in this generation can see, oh, there is a bigger place worldwide for me to go outside of WWE. Most people use these other places to get to WWE. They don't use WWE to get to those spaces. So she walked in. I mean, like when we're talking about her now, we have to put her in the conversation of activity like a Ric Flair, like a Hulk Hogan, which I'm sure people never thought we'd be in that conversation. But think about it. She had her first match in New Japan for their women's championship. Hogan had his first match in WWE for the world title. Hogan had his first match in WCW for the world title. Like this is this caliber of star that we're looking at. And so it actually is interesting to me when we think about all the times that WWE did not pull the trigger on Sasha Banks by making her the main figure in the women's division. She always had to play second fiddle to somebody else, whether it was Becky or Charlotte. She was always playing second fiddle. Now she's proving I can go somewhere and take this promotion on my shoulders and take it to the world. She's done it in 2 months. That's scary.
And in her own words, money changes everything.
Everything.
That's
unbelievable.
Crazy. Even going back to your point when you said about Jonathan Gresham traveling the world with the ROH title, going to different promotions. The biggest, and that was great. That was amazing. We were talking about it for months and months.
Right.
The difference here is with what Jonathan Gresham was doing, he was trying to save a promotion on his own back. The promotion was about to go, it was disappearing. He was like, well, I'm trying to hold on to something that that I tried to build.
Right.
Where Mercedes has the train behind her. They're telling her this promotion is growing and going on, and she's the one running with it. That in itself is a game changer. That's revolutionary. And for it to be a woman, a Black woman doing it, it's mad. It's crazy to fathom, crazy to think. I'm excited for what can happen here. You know, we're talking about Mickie James and Mercedes in just over a month.
Yeah.
That's the first.
I mean, that's
the first one.
Unheard of. That's unheard of.
Yeah. So, to think the other matches you could have, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be women in specific promotions. So, for example, we could see Mercedes versus Taya Valkyrie in AAA, for example.
Absolutely, we could.
Stuff like that. And there's so many others. We've not even talked about the possibilities in AEW. You know what I mean? That could happen at some point, somewhere, somehow. And the thing is as well, I think I saw a podcast where someone was saying they don't want to see her sign with AEW and stuff like that. She doesn't have to sign with AEW at all.
That's the beauty of this. The beauty of this is she walks into AEW already as the IWGP Women's Champion.
Right.
So they are so this puts her in an amazing position because she now doesn't have to fall victim to what other folks who have gone to AEW fall victim to, because she's not part then of their regular weekly programming. She shows up as a special attraction for, I don't know, Forbidden Door 2. I mean, like, you've got all of these, her and Jamie Hayter. Geesh. You know, her and Sheeta. Like, her and Britt Baker. Like, the possibilities are, oh my God, her and Saraya, right? Like, the possibilities right now are endless. And to me, I see why she made this move, because there's a bigger world. And when you fought everybody in the system that you're already in, how do you ever know that you'll get better? You know, you have to be able to expand this. So I think this becomes something very, very special for Mercedes. I think that the Japanese culture is about to embrace her big time, because they're now starting to understand, oh, she's a star, you know? And I think the other significant moment coming out of Battle in the Valley was how the show ended, right? So to have, you know, on one hand, Okada ending it, which we all kind of felt here in the States, like, Okada Tanahashi is legendary 3 years ago. Right. But this is not that Tanahashi anymore. So we're not, we're not concerned about it. But to have her literally interrupt Okada, and it was like, no, this is the go home image. Good Lord. You know, I'm going to be daring enough to say that Mercedes Moné is the only one in New Japan right now who's able to make this global expansion happen.
Oh, yes,
she can do what Okada can't do. She can do what Tanahashi can't do. And then with a Jay White, who is now gone, who do you have that can wave the US flag and really go around the world and be known? It's her.
Right. And even with the, the credentials of your Okadas and your Tanahashi, difference is they became massive in Japan. And we kind of found out about them, or the majority, should I say, found out about them later on. We didn't see the rise of we didn't see the rise of Okada. We saw them at their peak. Whereas with Mercedes, we've seen the growth. It's a very different thing when you get to follow the story than when you get to the peak of the story and then you join in. You know what I mean? It's like with any kind of series on Netflix, for example, you'll hear people talking about this, that, and whatever, at Game of Thrones and blah, blah, blah. You don't watch it from episode 7. You watch it from the start.
Right. That's right. That's right.
We've seen this with Mercedes the whole way through, NXT to WWE and now New Japan. So they have caught her at the best possible moment they could have.
I agree.
Best possible moment they could have, and she is definitely, in a much better, way better position than any other person on their roster that they have any kind of connection to run this ship of taking them, global, with what they're trying to do. The possibilities are endless. The excitement is crazy. I'm just so glad it's her.
Yes.
That was in. There's a couple of ladies it could have been. It could have been a couple of ladies. Mickey James maybe at some point. You know what I mean? And Taya Valkyrie maybe to a point. But for it to be Mercedes, it's something else. So I'm very excited to see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen next. And I don't want to know. I'm living in this uncertainty in a very good way. And
I totally agree.
That's the beauty of this whole thing. It's crazy. Moving on a little bit, but still talking about a rise of someone. The Elimination Chamber happened over the weekend. We saw the men's Elimination Chamber match was for the US Championship, Austin Theory's US Championship. We saw David Priest. We saw Seth Rollins, Bronson Reed,
Gargano,
Johnny Gargano, and of course Montez Ford in the match. Talk to me about how you felt when you saw Montez come out for that match. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to leave you to say that. I'm going to leave you to
I will say this. The intentionality of all that happened in the Elimination Chamber was special to me. And that men's elimination chamber served multiple purposes. And one of the purposes was to establish Montez Ford as a singles star, not a singles competitor, a singles star. And so it started with the entrance. It started with that amazing gear he came out in. And I mean, when you saw that, that wasn't Street Profits. Oh no. There was if you didn't know he was part of the Street Profits, you would not have known from his entrance.
Not in the slightest.
I mean, the gear, let me tell you something. It helps when your wife is making your gear. It helps. She spared no expense. It was perfect for his personality. It said star all the way. It said I could leave as champion, but most importantly, y'all are going to know tonight, I'm a star.
Right.
And he had nothing but star-making moments all the way through that match, from him being the last person let out of the pod, right? So we wait for the anticipation. Like it was perfect.
But you know what's crazy about that as well? Where the main camera was for most of the match, he was the one in the back watching the whole thing.
Right.
So you got to see him the whole time as well. Oh.
Yes. It was all so intentional. And then he comes out guns a-blazing. Now, I think it was on this show where we said we had the expectation that he would do his massive frog splash off the top of the pod.
Right.
He fooled us all and decided to literally climb. He went bigger than that, right? Climbs to the very top in a Spider-Man. We didn't know what he was going to do. And literally does a flip from the top of this thing all the way down to the floor. I mean, it was incredible. Even to the fact that it was him, Theory, and Seth.
Yep.
Like at one point you could think, all right, well, if he got eliminated first, hey, at least he was in there and he was involved in seeing he eliminated people. He had amazing moments and moves, and even he was part of what helped Seth lose. Him being injured, leaving the chamber open. Like, I really hope that people were able to see what happened here. This was not about him having to win the U.S. title. No. It was bigger than that. It was about the world seeing this is a star. And he's a star without having to lean on the Street Profits. He is a star in and of himself. And he established that in a massive way. At this point, I think the wise move is to let them part amicably. We don't need a war between the two. I think the New Day showed us that, hey, we can support each other as we go on our individual endeavors. And if we need to come together, we'll come together. But let both these guys go and be great, because Montez Ford Saturday night was great.
I mean, you've mentioned it all, but let's bullet point all the facts that happened in this match for Montez in order to really show people just how important this was for him. His entrance. He was in the back of the shot throughout the whole match. The last person to come in. He had the most eliminations with 2. And he eliminated the 2 biggest guys in the match.
Sure did.
Let's not forget that part. He eliminated the biggest guys in the match. And he was in that final 3 as well. And of course, him leaving, with that head injury, and he was walking a little bit. Gates opened in order for Logan Paul to then get involved, and the match end or be the reason for the way the match ended. So Montez Ford played a heavily important part throughout that whole match from start to finish, even when he was almost especially when he wasn't wrestling.
Right.
Which is crazy, which tells you a lot just from that alone. We're talking about what happens from here. We don't necessarily see the amicable split between tag team partners. Yes, the New Day was something different, but that was 3 of them. So while Big E left, the 2 were still together, so they could still hold on to something. Whereas with this now, obviously, two of them, one goes the other way. I don't know whether it's going to be amicable. I don't know if it's going to be. The only way it can be, for me, would be with a draft. One has to go to one brand. One goes to SmackDown, one stays on Raw. Okay. For me, that's the only amicable way it happens.
Okay.
I'm not fussed either way, you know, whether it's amicable, whether they have some kind of feud. But at the same time, it's kind of, I guess the real negative to that is it's been done so many times.
Right.
We're used to it and we probably expect it, which isn't the baddest thing, but at the same time, give us something a little different, maybe. So I don't know what happened from here. Okay, so we didn't see Montez on Raw last night. You know, this whole injury. For those that don't know, he's not legitimately injured. Although he made it look as if he was. Even though the stump didn't look that
even that.
Yeah, even the stump didn't look that serious. He made me think, hold on, wait a second. But we find out that he's not legitimately injured. It just was part of, you know, the whole ending with Logan Paul being able to come through, or the gates were open for quite a while and stuff like that. But what do you expect, or what do you want to see in any type, you know, in any type of return for Montez the next time we see him on television?
I feel like it has to go one of two ways. Obviously, Montez needs a mic to be able to talk about this U.S. title Elimination Chamber situation. If they don't interview him or give him an opportunity to talk, they've missed something special. He needs to be able to say, hey, you know what? I went in there. I fought hard. I did what I had to do. It's always been in me. And here is where we could either determine amicable split or not. It could be determined in this interview. Because if on one hand he says, hey, and I want to thank my dog, you know, you've been with me the whole time, you supported me the whole time, you know, there you could plant the seeds to say, hey, you know what, I'm for you. I don't want to get in your way. You go on and do this. Or in that same statement, you know, his partner can come back and say, yeah, but it should have been me. And yeah, you know, I've heard all the rumblings out there. I've had to do podcast interviews explaining why I'm not going to be left out. And here was another opportunity where I got left out. Like, no, you know? So I think the interview is where we can start to see the seeds one way or the other. Now, I mean, as much as we want to see an amicable breakup, there are ways to do this where it still works for both of them. Right. I think the improvement that we've seen in Angelo Dawkins says that he can fly on his own. Now, will he fly as high as Montez? We don't know yet. But we do know that he won't necessarily drift into oblivion, which is a good thing. So I think the next thing that has to happen is an interview, and an interview where it's a prime spot, not a backstage interview. Put him in the ring and let this be special.
For sure. Moving on just a little bit more. We saw just before Elimination Chamber, we saw Bray Wyatt on SmackDown in this very slightly peculiar segment where he's come out with Uncle Howdy. We can now see that they're, you know, toe and toe and all the rest of it. And he calls out Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar and says, whoever comes out as the winner, you better run. Why is Bray Wyatt getting involved in Brock Lesnar and Lashley business? Moving to Elimination Chamber, obviously we had the match between the two, great match. Bobby Lashley got the better of Brock Lesnar, had him in the hurt lock. Brock Lesnar panicked, hit him with the low blow. Bobby Lashley then come out on Raw, obviously mentioned the same thing. We also saw on Raw MVP and Omos get involved in the madness, where MVP is calling out Brock Lesnar to come and face Omos next week. What is going on with this whole conundrum, this whole mixing pot of madness when it comes to Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar?
I think we're seeing the ultimate swerve. The ultimate swerve is happening. because it seems rather obvious
Mm-hmm.
that it should be Lesnar, Lashley 4 at Hell in a Cell inside of Mania. Instead, what's happening is we're getting these decoys. Now, on no universe does anybody expect Brock Lesnar and Omos to fight at WrestleMania of all places. Are you kidding me? Like, he would not soil his hands with Omos. You know, so I think it's all a decoy. I think it's a decoy to be able to create a space to bring us the Hurt Business and ultimately lead us back to that. Equally, I don't believe that Bray Wyatt has any real interest in Bobby Lashley. I think this is all a smokescreen. We have way too long to figure out how this is going to happen. But yeah, I don't believe this for a second. I think next week, Brock Lesnar, if he shows up, breaks up the contract, says this is not who Omos is not who I want. I need to fight Lashley. So we have F5's Omos, one and done. We don't need to go to WrestleMania. I want Lashley. Give me Lashley. I think that's what we have happen. But there's no way that, you know, Lesnar is signing a contract to fight Omos. And there's no way that Bray Wyatt is fighting Bobby Lashley. Like, those worlds just don't mix.
Yeah, it all seems very weird to me. I mean, for me, it's kind of, there's a possibility of this whole thing helping us get Bobby Lashley back with the Hurt Business. And then we get Lashley and Lesnar in this final match or at Mania. The whole Bray Wyatt thing, I have no idea where that's going. The only thing I can think is that is a possibility of Bray, Brock, Lesnar. It kind of sounds WWE WrestleMania-ish, but at the same time, it's like, how and why? Like, it's almost like you're just trying to throw something together and it just makes no sense. I can't think of why he's getting involved. Maybe we'll get answers on Friday on SmackDown. Who knows? Maybe. But it all seems a bit weird. Whereas the Hurt Business stuff, especially with the way it happened yesterday on Raw, kind of feels a little forced as well now, with MVP trying to get involved. There was no... It would have been better if it was a thing where we saw a backstage segment with MVP speaking to Bobby Lashley and saying, look, you've still got a Lesnar problem. Let me help you. I'll send Omos, blah, blah, blah. But we didn't get that. We didn't get any kind of conversation between Lashley and MVP. So it kind of feels a bit... it just doesn't mix properly.
Yeah, it's just one of those odd things that's thrown out there. And it's like, because even when Lashley came out last night, there was no mention of MVP when he came out. He didn't say, hey, you don't have to do my dirty work. I can handle this myself. Like, none of that. So, yeah, I think this is one of those odd things that's going to eventually circle back to where we expect it to be. I just can't possibly see Brock and Omos at WrestleMania. No,
I mean, if we do get Brock come out and face Omos, I think it's gonna end quickly somehow. Bobby Lashley's gonna get involved in some way, and then maybe there's gonna be someone gets thrown in the firing line of a spear or something like that because of someone else, and then we'll get this whole Hurt Business conversation and blah blah blah. Yeah. But until then, I guess we have to eagerly await Monday Night Raw to see what happens there. So it is Black History Month, as we all know, and we've been doing our weekly tributes to Black history in pro wrestling. We did the men, the ladies. This week, Gerard, you've got tag teams for us. Your Black history when it comes to Black tag teams in pro wrestling.
Absolutely. Well, you know, again, part of the reason why we do this is to help those who are watching who are, you know, 30 and under, dare I say, who may have only been watching wrestling for the last decade, to realize that wrestling wasn't always like what we see. You know, we look today and we see this proliferation of Black tag teams and Black wrestlers. I mean, we'll after this Black History moment, we'll talk about the importance of the Black woman right now in pro wrestling, because that's special. But that wasn't the case 20 years ago. Certainly wasn't the case 30 years ago. And we talked about this before, but this is a good starting point when we start talking about black tag teams. We have to mention, of course, Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, the Soul Patrol, who became the first African-American WWE tag team champions back in 1983. Now, yes, they only held the title for 3 weeks, but they were still the first, and it would be a long, long time before we would see that happen in WWE again. Now, when we start talking about these big-time teams, we have to talk about a team that doesn't get as much attention but should. That is the team of Doom. It's Ron Simmons, Butch Reed, who became the NWA/WCW World Tag Team Champions in like 89, 1990. Again, that's 6 or 7 years after Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, which is crazy when you think about that, right? But the team of Doom was special because unlike Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, they had a black manager, that being Teddy Long, former referee, you know, who we got to see become a manager of all managers. He would then go on to manage a team called the Skyscrapers that featured a guy named Mean Mark Callis that would become The Undertaker, right? Hence the reason he put The Undertaker in all those tag team matches, because that's what he did. So Doom was special. I mean, you had Butch Reed, who was the guy in Mid-South, and he was a major figure, certainly during that era. Ron Simmons, of course, major college football player, comes into the world of pro wrestling, does incredible things. It would be after this tag title run that he would eventually get a world title run back in 1992. So special times for sure. But teams like the Soul Patrol and Doom made it special and paved the way for other teams like Harlem Heat, which we saw in WCW, Booker T and Stevie Ray, multi-time tag team champions there. They really set the standard in an era, you know, that was dominated by these guys, the Legion of Doom or the Steiner brothers. You know, it was the real team of Harlem Heat that became the Steady Eddies and the standard there in WCW, certainly during that Nitro era, all the way really until the end, ultimately leading to Booker T becoming a single star, a U.S. champion, a TV champion, and a world champion. Now, during that same time you had the Harlem Heat, you had the Nation of Domination over in WWE, who were not just a tag team, but they were a faction. And while that faction did not win the tag team championships, they certainly won the Intercontinental Championship. They won the European Championship, and they became the kind of tag team and faction that would really send shockwaves throughout the wrestling world. So the Nation of Domination, again, they did not win any tag titles, but they certainly won European titles. They won Intercontinental Championships, and they really created stars. You know, obviously, Ron Simmons comes into this particular group as the leader of the group, gives us Mark Henry, who at that time, you know, Mark Henry was coming off of his Olympic run, and that wasn't the best run, certainly coming into WWE, but the Nation proved to be amazing for him. Gave us, of course, the Godfather ultimately, who again was a legend in his own right, but really started picking up steam there and would leave there, becoming the Godfather and doing great things. And of course, a young Rocky Maivia who would transform into The Rock. And many don't realize that the music that became The Rock's signature music was actually originally the music of the Nation of Domination. Right. So I think that's very, very interesting that the Nation gave us The Rock's theme song ultimately, on top of giving us The Rock. So that's pretty amazing when you think about that. Now, before there was the Nation, and during the time of Harlem Heat, during that New Generation era, there was a team that many probably forgot about. They were Mabel and Mo, Men on a Mission. And we probably tried to forget about them because, you know, they were caricatures, dare I say. They were the rapping fun team, you know, and Mabel, his claim to fame, of course, he would go on to become the King of the Ring during that era, which was a wild era to think King Mabel. He would eventually become Viscera and part of the Ministry of Darkness and have a very interesting run for sure. They did not win tag team gold, but again, they were an important team because they really kind of bridged the gap in WWE until we got to the Attitude Era, where we were able to have teams like the Nation of Domination. Now, then there was the team in ECW happening during this time called the Gangsters, which were just wild. And they literally epitomized that name full on. They would wrestle literally with no rules. They'd be the only folks I knew that would wrestle with a soundtrack. Like most people would come to the ring and just have music. No, their music is playing the entire time. They were wild, gave us some dangerous moments in the ring for sure. And one would argue that a reincarnation of them to some degree was the controversial Crime Time. And I call Crime Time controversial because the vignettes that introduced them did not make a lot of us very happy at all. It seemed very, very stereotypical of Black people in terms of being criminals and things of that nature. You know, they eventually would become a loved tag team, giving us JTG and Shad Gaspard, both of whom went on to really do some pretty important things in our business. Now, there was one point where Crime Time got close to the main event where they were actually teaming with John Cena in 6-man tags, and they actually got a shot at the tag team championships as well during that Ruthless Aggression era, though they weren't able to gain the victory on that. Another interesting team during that time was the Prime Time Players. That would be Darren Young and Titus O'Neil, both of whom, would have those millions of dollars, like that whole thing, right? Now, they ended up becoming successful and becoming tag team champions back at Money in the Bank 2015, ironically defeating a team called the New Day. But then, of course, that SummerSlam, they would lose the title just a couple of months later, once again, to the New Day. They would end up splitting as a team. Many remember their run for sure. Individually, they weren't necessarily as successful in WWE per se. Titus O'Neil really became known more so as a great ambassador for WWE and all of his exploits outside of the ring. Meanwhile, the former Darren Young has found great success over in New Japan Pro Wrestling, becoming their strong open weight champion for quite some time until, of course, this past weekend at Battle in the Valley. So, of course, we have to talk about the New Day, who obviously most people know, the New Day and the Street Profits, quite frankly, the modern day amazing tag teams in WWE. Both have been multiple time tag team champions. The New Day, of course, had that run with the longest WWE reign of all time, 483 days, of course. That was just beaten by the Usos. Throw our ones in the air for the bloodline. So that's the case with them. But the Usos and the New Day had an amazing run and amazing war, as did the New Day and the Street Profits. And so watching the Street Profits really come up and become an amazing tag team as well. We talked about earlier the exploits of Montez Ford, which is exciting. We see the New Day has produced 2 world champions. They've also given us a King of the Ring, multiple time Intercontinental champions and the like. So certainly very, very successful production there. And I think Black tag teams are really becoming far more common today, with some other great teams that are out there doing amazing things. But that doesn't happen without some of these legendary teams that we've talked about. And speaking of legendary Black tag teams, I think it's safe to talk about the Renegade Twins, who are the new NWA Women's Tag Team Champions. History in and of itself on that regard, just continuing to show all of the great things that Black tag teams are able to do.
For sure, for sure. Of course, you can see that we've been joined by Mex. Good to see
yes.
How's things? You look tired.
Yeah. I had a long day in London at work, but I had to come and complete this trios tag team.
Yes.
I'm sure you guys have spoken about it, but my main thing of jumping on here in this emergency style was because of Omos challenging Brock Lesnar. I was bamboozled when I saw that this day. I'm trying to watch this at work, like just quietly, and I nearly shouted out some expletives because I said, where did this come from? And yeah, I won't get back into it if you guys have spoken about it already, but it could, if it goes ahead, it could make a complete star in Omos. If at the same time though, it's like, he'll make Bobby Lashley look a bit lesser, I think. Because it's like, how can Omos kind of get over Brock Lesnar, and Bobby has seemingly struggled. But, it is very early. I guess we'll see how that one pans out. But yeah,
listen, I said it earlier. There's the potential for it to be in the mix of the whole Hurt Business getting back together, MVP getting, in cahoots with Bobby Lashley again. And there's going to be some kind of interference or something like that to where Bobby Lashley gets speared when it's supposed to be Omos or something like that. And then we'll get some kind of start to this whole, hopefully this whole, Hurt Business getting back together and stuff like that. But we're just as bamboozled as you, and we're kind of like, all right, we'll just have to wait till next Monday to see what this whole thing is about. It's a lot. It's a lot. Speaking of the tag teams, as Gerard's mentioned, Mex, I'm going to come to you first actually with this one. From all these tag teams that we've seen, so we mentioned the Harlem Heat, Doom back in the day, Nation Domination, the New Day, Street Profits of the modern day, and stuff like that. What is one of your favorite tag team, or possibly one of your favorite black tag team moments across the time you've been a wrestling
fan? Black tag team moments. I did enjoy the work of Sasha and Naomi. That might be a bit of recency bias, but I think those two coming together, they've always been joined by the hip in one way in WWE. I know we're often kind of told the best friend is Bayley and all of this kind of, and Naomi's not included when we talk about the Four Horsewomen, but Naomi has always been cited, especially as like one of the OG black women of the current modern day that has kind of taken in Sasha Banks when she came. Bianca Belair now that when she came up, so and Naomi has been not, it's always been documented, she's never been nothing but a cheerleader for these girls and never kind of seen as one in, one out. I'm the first black woman here, so I need to get pushed and not these guys. Like, it's never been anything like that. And I thought their tag team run was very good. Street Profits ascent as well to the NXT tag team championships, particularly because it was so well done. And, Street Profits, you could just see the momentum that they were gathering on NXT. Like, every time they came out, they turned the place into a party. Angelo Dawkins. I don't know how long I'd been watching Angelo Dawkins in NXT with all different kinds of gimmicks before Montez Ford found him and literally took him to the promised land. And, then when they won that championship in that ladder match, like, it was really something. And now, you can see both of them coming into their own. Angelo Dawkins, he's prepared to do the work to not be the Jannetty of this group, and you can see it's paying off. And obviously Montez Ford, again, you've probably spoken about his exploits in the chamber on Saturday, and he the minute he came out, the whole ensemble, I said, this guy is a star. I don't even need him to enter that chamber and do anything mad. Like, I'm sold on him. Like, I'm absolutely sold on him. Yeah, it was great. And obviously the performance in the chamber has got people talking as well. So yeah, I would say Street Profits definitely, and Naomi and Sasha Banks.
Gerard, for yourself?
There's a couple of moments I thought about. You mentioned the Street Profits, Mex. The moment when they actually had that handoff, the switch of the SmackDown and Raw tag titles
with the
New Day.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing.
Like, there were people that were like, I can't believe they're just swapping the titles like that. But I'm like, wait, you got two extremely hot teams, and they are in this moment where they are able to swap tag team titles, and nobody looks at either of their reigns as diminished. It spoke a lot about where we have come as tag teams. I also go back and think about Doom. Doom, what I liked about them was it was the first time I really got a chance to see Black men be dominant. Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, they were happy-go-lucky and they didn't last long. And really prior to Doom, there weren't a whole lot of tag teams or even Black wrestlers who, you know, you could see that would hold titles for any length of time. Doom was just intimidating, the same kind of intimidation that, you know, the Legion of Doom would give. And a lot of people were trying to do that, but they did it. They were masked at first, which made the mystique even bigger, you know, and then when they took off those masks and it was like, oh, y'all are no joke. Okay.
Right.
I don't want to run into y'all. Y'all hurt people. It's great. I loved Doom. And then interestingly enough, going back and watching the Nation of Domination, I don't think most people who lived through the Attitude Era actually appreciated it, because in that time frame, what they were saying, we were conditioned not to listen to. But to go back now and hear them talking about, hey, why haven't there been any Black WWE champions? Like, why hasn't these, and calling Vince McMahon on the carpet in the middle of the ring on live television. Are you kidding me? Like that kind of thing is wild and crazy. And I don't know that wrestlers or WWE are that brave in 2023 to be able to do something like that. But those kinds of moments have led to the moments that we're able to celebrate now. So those are some of my favorite moments for sure.
Most definitely, man. You know, for me, Harlem Heat was a big standout for me. They were just very different, both very powerful, both quite quick in you know, in how they moved as well in the ring. You know, them being brothers made it even more, you know, special in some way, that connection that they had, or the rest of it. But the one thing I want to mention that wasn't mentioned in this, I need to give a big shout out to Devon Dudley. Devon Dudley being part of Dudley Boys, of course, one of the most decorated tag teams in history. Devon Dudley was a massive part of it, of course, with alongside his brother, Bully Ray, or Bubba Ray at one point as well. You know, so Devon was a game changer. And you know what? We saw towards the end of his in-ring career how good he was on his own as well, which was massive. He recently just kind of retired, not from the ring, but from you know, working with WWE, or moved away from working with WWE, should I say, and he's still training future stars as well at the moment. Malik Blade, who's in NXT, is one of his students at one point, and I think there's a couple of us in NXT at the moment who's come through his school as well. So a shout out to Devon Dudley as well. But before we end this show, Gerard, you mentioned Sasha, Mercedes Mone, Mex, you mentioned Naomi, and we want to talk about like the importance of the Black female star in wrestling at the moment. We've said it before, but it never gets old to talk about, because right now we've got Bianca as the Raw Women's Champion, heading into a second main event at WrestleMania 2 years in a row. Obviously, we talked about Mercedes Mone as the new IWGP Women's Champion. We've got Jade as TBS Champion. We've got Athena, who is currently the ROH Women's Champion. The Renegade Twins, who are holding the NWA Tag Team Championships. The list at the moment kind of goes on and on. We see, you know, quite a few ladies winning championships on the independents as well. How important do you think it is, Gerard, at the moment for these women to be in these positions?
I can't even stress the level of importance to this. You know, we talked a couple of months ago when the PWI 150 came out, and we saw that, you know, Bianca and Jade were like 2 and 5. And the idea that you had 2 Black women being deemed the top of this industry. You know, the previous year, Bianca was number 1. No telling what it's going to look like by the end of 2023, given the way it started, right? But the idea that right now you could turn on any of the major promotions in this business and see a Black woman as the top woman in that promotion, it is so big. I mean, like it is, you know, it's often been said that certainly in the States, and it's probably true around the world, that the least respected human on the planet is the African-American woman. Right. Because of all she has to endure and all she's had to deal with. And so for the wrestling world, who at times have really reflected what the rest of the world looks like in terms of how they treat people, in terms of how people are booked and presented, for the wrestling world collectively and independent of each other to say, we believe in a Black woman this much. You know, it's massive. It is massive for Black women to be able to feel like they want to be in the world of wrestling and to know that they can get an equal opportunity. Isn't it interesting that even with Charlotte Flair back in the mix at WWE, we're still talking about Bianca Belair, right? Bianca's star has not dimmed a bit with Charlotte showing up. And Bianca said something in an interview recently where I didn't even consider it. The fact that her and Charlotte have been wrestling the same amount of time blows me away, because Charlotte came in completely blind. Charlotte had never wrestled before WWE. We just know because her dad was a wrestler, we go, oh, well, Charlotte. No, they were literally training at the same time from scratch. So it's amazing to think that obviously Charlotte Flair, like it or not, she's Charlotte Flair. She's got Rick's DNA, et cetera, et cetera. Bianca comes in as a first-generation wrestler and is able to withstand the pot shots, withstand all the Sam Roberts of the world, withstand all of those things, and be unapologetically her, the number one woman in WWE. And to think, Mercedes and Bianca 2 years ago, main event WrestleMania, and now they're literally running the world in separate places. You've got Jade, you've got Athena. I mean, and all four of these women have different body types, have different personalities, have different expressions of who they are. There is no one particular presentation that stands as the Black woman wrestler. I love this. What a time to be alive.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Mex, we talked about Mercedes winning the IWGP, how important it is for her, you know, to be able to now take this title around the world, as she's already said. In your mind, how important is it for her and for wrestling in general for it to be her, and very specifically a Black woman, in this type of position?
Firstly, I will never forget when I made a video early on when I started on YouTube. And at that time, this must have been like 2020. And I said, Mercedes Moné, or Sasha Banks at the time, was in my my Black Mount Rushmore. Then people said I'm crazy. I got dragged on Twitter. I got dragged on Twitter. I thought I had said something and I clipped up that bit and I put it on Twitter and I got dragged.
Wow.
And now it's just like, we can see she was top dog then, let alone now. Like, I think it's absolutely incredible. Like, I mean, we all knew this was going to happen. This was the decision to make. This was very much an intelligent business decision upon acquiring her. If they didn't make her champion, a lot of people would have not watched New Japan again. Like, just because people are tuning in for her. Right. They made the decision. They made the right decision. They put on a fantastic match. And a Black woman is their second ever champion for this new title they just created in Japan, right? Not America. Like, I mean, the first champion was probably always going to be, you know, someone of Japanese descent. And they've literally passed it on now to a gaijin, as they call it, and to a Black woman. Like, this is crazy. Like, AEW started, for instance. The minute they designed the belt, we're all having conversations as we do. Who's the first Black champion? Up to today, no one has come to a conclusion of who the first Black champion will be. there is no clear path of, you know, it's like when you're looking at it for AEW, it's like a horse race. A horse goes ahead, like Ricky Starks right now, or then someone else comes along, you think it's that person. There's still no clear answer. We still don't have a clear answer of who the first Black male AEW champion will be. Yet there's other companies that are highly invested in these kind of people. WWE put 2 Black women in the main event. Like, we've got a Black champion right now. I just think for a company that's not kind of, and it's not to say New Japan is racist or anything. I don't know if they have any history of any of that kind of stuff, but they have put a Black person in charge as the spearhead for this, you know, spearhead this brand new division in their company, spearhead this Western, you know, move / takeover they want to make. Because let's not lie, this is all on the likes of her shoulders and maybe Kenny Omega, who's the United States champion and has some exposure in the United States already. Like, this is massive trust, you know, kind of given to her, great responsibility. And she's going to knock it out of the park. Like, she's literally going to knock this out of the park. She has waited for this. She has prayed for this. She has asked for this. They've given her the keys. It's like, go, show us what you can do. And she's not going to make any, you know, mistakes along the way. And for the likes of, you know, we got Bianca Belair in WWE, we've got Jade Cargill in AEW, the Renegade Twins winning the tag team titles. Like, this is very much empowering, like, because like you said, if this particular demographic of women, Black women, are seen as, you know, bottom barrel, if you like, and I don't want to use that term with our own Black women, but that's you know, where they're seen in the pecking order, but they're occupying all of these positions in at least this industry, then others will be looking like, right, you know, I actually have something to aspire to. And it doesn't actually now proven have to be through the WWE. You know, AEW have somewhat shown faith in a fresh Jade, and she's learning on the job and doing a great job. Japan have just basically got one of the biggest female exports over there, being a Black woman. So, you know, there's lots of exposure, there's lots of places. There's a lot of Black women that, you know, Trisha Dora, who's been over in Japan, Queen Aminata as well. Like, these guys should be seeing now, listen, there's no excuse. I can't even play this card of, you know, I'm Black and I don't know if they're looking at me. Girls, there's no excuse. It's time to get to work, because these avenues are being created and forged by these people, and it's just great to see. I mean, when I deeped it after she carried that belt and I was watching this show, and it hit me that Jade Cargill's over here with a belt, Bianca Belair's over here with a belt, I said, no, this is madness. Like, it's very, you know, it's something to shout about, for real.
For sure. And as much as Mercedes isn't the first Black woman to wrestle in Japan or for a Japanese promotion, you know, you mentioned Trisha Dora, Queen Aminata. Most recently, Janae Kai was there, or the last couple of weeks. Nightingale.
Riho's been there.
Rio's been there as well. Willow's there in November. We've seen people go over there before in the past. The likes of, obviously, Awesome Kong was massive over there as well for a time. I forget her name and I don't know why, but former AEW Women's Champion. Oh my gosh.
Shida? Nyla Rose?
Nyla Rose, that's the one. She made a name in Japan before being signed to AEW. She was there for a long time. You know, so it's not new, but at the same time, with Mercedes now being in this position, it's going to open the door much wider for any aspiring young Black female wrestlers, those that are coming through now, those who are maybe training at the moment. It opens the doors massively. And then you've got the likes of Bianca, Jade, Athena, even Tasha Steelz in Impact, who are prominent figures, champions or former champions in their respective promotions. It's crazy. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, who comes up next, you know, in the pecking order of these promotions and what it's going to mean for us. But on that great note, this is the end of our show. You have been watching WrstlXtra on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to be informed of all the stuff my guy Mex is doing on his wonderful channel. You can also, of course, follow him on WrestleManiac.uk on Instagram, WrestleManiac UK on Twitter. You can follow this guy, the Professor Gerard Bonner, wherever he turns up, or follow him at Bonafide on all things. And of course, his show, The Faction Show, WWT Live, Southern Honor Wrestling, and everywhere else that he appears. You can follow me if you don't already. I don't understand why, but I am a Dazzle. You can find me on Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram and BWA Dazzle on Twitter. This has been our show, and we will see you again next week.